All right, guys. Our next guest has fought in such organizations as the UFC, Pride, King of the Cage, Rings, WEC, Cage Rage, and wrestled for companies such as the WWE and NWA. He is a multiple-time world champion, former UFC super fight champion, Triple Crown champion, and a Hall of Famer. He's had over 120 pro fights and is a certified legend and pioneer. I hope you know who he is by now. He is none other than Dan the Beast Severn. Dan, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fantastic there, Casper. Well, that's quite an introduction. I was excited, waiting to see who's going to come on the line.
That's the short version. We had to cull about 70% of it. You got a lot of accolades, Dan. You had a very long career, a very busy career, one that spanned almost 2 decades, and it finally came to an end officially in 2013. What have you been up to since then? What have you been doing to stay busy post-retirement?
Well, I mean, it's actually, Casper, I kind of like to go back to the fact that I've been doing something for over 40 years now in the terms of most people only really know me from what I've done once I climbed into a cage. That's, I was well past my prime when I first entered my cage for the very first time back in 1994, but again, that's what people know me from, and from there, I should say my first profession was professional wrestling as of the 1992 Olympics. I first got involved in that industry, and then I jumped into the cage fighting stuff as of 1994. Most people think it's just the opposite, but I'm the guy that went through it. I should know what was my timetables on things. So I've always been somewhat infatuated with the wacky world of professional wrestling. I still do that, even though I don't do any more of the cage fighting stuff. It's easier to do one that is strictly for theatrical purposes, and the other, the real deal, well, everyone only has so much shelf life.
Absolutely, Dan. And I mean, your career has spanned such a long time, and it's very, very impressive. I'm just curious on the comment you just made previously about sort of being a little bit past it when you first made your debut in 1994. Can you expand that on that a little bit for us? Do you feel like you were a little bit older, and if everything would have been perfect, you would have liked to get into it when you were a bit younger?
I'll just state actual facts there, Dennis. I mean, the fact is, here I am back in 1994, just before turning 37 years of age, I start a cage fighting career. You name me anybody else that has started a cage fighting career at that age and has come even close to the success that I have had. It doesn't exist. Again, I only ever anticipated doing one event because I did not know how it was going to go for me. I should be looked at, okay, what are my skills that I'm bringing to the table, what I'm about to jump into. And again, your listeners, when they hear about mixed martial arts, they think of today's product. Today's product of mixed martial arts has approximately 37 rules. Part of those 37 rules, there are weight classes, there are time periods, the rounds. They fight one opponent in a given evening, and they wear mixed martial arts gloves. Now, back in the prior to the mixed martial arts era, it was known as NHB, or No Holds Barred. No Holds Barred only had two rules. Those being, do not bite your opponent, do not stick fingers in their eye sockets, no eye gouging. End of the rules. Anything that your imagination can think of, you are good to go. There were no weight classes, no time periods, bare-knuckled action, and it was an 8-man tournament. You had to face and defeat 3 opponents in a 2-hour pay-per-view. The same a lot of time that they still allow today, but they fight one opponent, that you had to fight 3 different people and become the winner. And realistically, I am the only Triple Crown winner from the no holds barred time period. And since it is now against the law to do, I'm it. So I'm in a category by myself. Now, still expounding on more what you're saying is, to start a career at the age I did, with the success ratio that I had, and the fact is I can claim lifetime chemical-free status You find another heavyweight that can claim that it does not walk this planet. I know most of these groups in the organization. I probably know most of their suppliers, only because I've been also involved in the gym industry for quite a few years, and I've been around steroids, growth hormones, all my entire life. I just never bothered to cross the line to go into it. Because I've had some groups approach me and say that, Dan, on your natural physical shape and size, we can take your 260, 265 pound frame, and we could probably put you up to about 3 1/4, ripped at about 6% body fat. You'd have 25 to 30% more power. And to me, it's like, bottom line there, Dennis and Casper, I take a great deal of pride in the fact that I have achieved all my success on my own ability. I didn't have to take a shot. I didn't have to take a pill. I simply just walked out there and I got the job done. So, in my opinion, I'm in a category all by myself, especially when you take in consideration for doing a career for 20 years. I only ever did 2 training camps. One for 32 days, one for 35 days. Now, you mentioned that to any one of these young fighters right now. They know who they're fighting, probably 6, 8 months out. And they're going into these camps for 3, 4 months in the process. And I'm thinking, I only ever did 2 training camps. I set them up myself because, training camps did not exist. There were no manuals, no DVDs, no VHS tapes. I did this stuff. I basically put it all together myself. So again, that just puts me head and shoulders above, in my opinion, against all the rest.
Yeah, I definitely would think that you're in a league of your own, Dan. And you mentioned, the drug side of MMA and things like that. Like you said, in the beginning of your career when you fought in the UFC, drug testing just wasn't a big part of the sport at all. Now it's becoming a massive part. What do you think about the movement to clean up the sport? And do you think PEDs will ever be removed from MMA?
I don't know about that. It's I think if you want it to be on a level playing field, the rules have got to be cut and dry all the way across. When you look at bodybuilding, for example, there's an amateur side and then there's a pro side. The amateur side, these guys look like 98-pound weaklings compared to the pros because these pros, they are putting so much chemicals into their body. They got arms that look like gorilla arms. They got legs that look like the hindquarters of a horse. They're just, you can, today, if you wanted to say you wanted to make Frankenstein, you really could make Frankenstein. You could take a 7-foot-tall basketball frame of a body and put them on the right chemicals and put them through the right type of training. You could build a Freakosaurus that weighs probably 300 to 400 pounds and will destroy anything that climbs into the cage with it. But did it win on its own ability? No. And I, as I said before, I take a great deal of pride in what I've done. I'm also, a lot of people don't realize, I actually have a teaching degree from Arizona State University. And I have coached at both Arizona State, Michigan State, the Michigan Wrestling Club. I've been teaching the sport of wrestling since 1971. And I just jumped into teaching professional wrestling when I got involved with that in 1992 because there was no set rules or how to conduct things, and it just all depends on what part of the country you were. They did things like this, they did things like that. My greatest gift there, guys, is physical mechanics. I sure wish it was something else, like singing or dancing, because I've been on like America's Got Talent, or we've been doing something else and would have had a whole different type of career ahead of me. But my gift is physical mechanics, and I'm the guy that can build you a better widget if there's a better widget to be made.
Wow. Now, Dan, let's go back in those days. Guys in the sport these days are retiring, a lot of them due to not wanting to compete against guys that may be on something. I'm just wondering, back in the day when you were first competing in the UFC, it was unheard of a fighter saying anything like that. How often before a fight did you look at a guy across the cage? You had so many of them, and you sort of in the back of your mind knew that perhaps this person was taking something. How much did that influence your mind going into a fight? And do you think it's a bit unheard of for some of these young fighters to be retiring because they're worried about their opponents being on PEDs?
Well, I mean, it's I'll answer that like two different ways right now. First, again, to give a little bit of a history lesson, in the no holds barred era, you did not find out who your opponent was until the night before. Whereas, again, today's mixed martial arts guys, they know about their opponent, 3, 4, 5 months out, even longer. Because, like, if you look at the UFC, they've got things scheduled so far out anymore that you know who your opponent is 6, 8 months ahead of the schedule. So back in that no holds barred era, it wasn't even the weigh-ins because there was no weight classes. They basically had a press conference. So you'd be sitting up at the head table, myself with 7 other people, participants, and they took out an old bingo game machine, this thing that has all the balls inside of it. And each one of these balls had eight balls in there, and each ball had a name on it. So when they would rotate it a few times, they'd pull out the first ball and basically just would set up an 8-man tournament bracket right up on the wall. So you found out who your opponent was the night before. So 24 hours later, you're climbing the case. So you're sizing up your opponent right then and there because you did not know who was going to be on one of the 8 individuals. So now, fast forwarding that to where now you know who your opponent is, and you climb into that cage, and you're looking across from him. Sure, you know who is doing things naturally, and you know who are doing things on the unnatural way. It's a telltale just by looking at the body types. Mm-hmm. And even in my final year, I was doing. It became more and more difficult for me to pass a lot of the medical clearances. Not because I'm unhealthy, I'm healthy of course, but because of my age, state by state, when you hit about anywhere between 36 and 38 years of age, most states do not want you to compete anymore, but it's all based upon boxing. Mm-hmm. Mixed martial arts this industry has only been around, it'll be 21 years come this December. So it's still a sport that is still so new, and not all the states in the U.S. still allow it to take place. And they all still follow the unified rules, but it's still an educational type of process.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Dan, because, in terms of the sport evolving and, the whole drug testing, it's so frequent, and it's one of the reasons they want to legitimize the sport of MMA. And like you said, when you're in the UFC, it was no holds barred, very different. What do you think about MMA as a sport, and do you think that one day it will be up in popularity and considered a mainstream sport, much like football or soccer or basketball?
Oh, it's there now. I mean, it's been there for the last couple of years. That it's accepted as a sport. It is mainstream, and it's rivaling and beating the numbers during, say, the football playoffs, during the basketball playoffs. It's incredible the notoriety that it has, and you're seeing more and more articles that are being printed in all the mainstream sports media, whether it be in magazine or internet forums and things of that nature. So it is there, and you have a lot of celebrities that are going to these various events just to watch. Again, the major draw for them is the main event, but it is there. I think that the industry will grow for the next, say, 3 to 5 years, to the point that in most sports there is the big national championship. There is the big, like the Super Bowl is, for the United States, that is our American football utopia game, mm-hmm. The Super Bowl, the top teams. Same way as in the wacky world of professional wrestling, they have what is known as WrestleMania. I think that eventually there will be an event that will be geared towards mixed martial arts that will be the collaboration of both, where you will have maybe the top heavyweight from the UFC will go against the top heavyweight from Bellator versus the top heavyweight from World Series of Fighting versus the top heavyweight from King of the Cage, Gladiator Challenge. I mean, there's so many different promotions out there right now, but I could see where there will be this collaboration of promoters to see the best of the best go at each other in this Utopia event held once a year. But the biggest problem that we're going to have right now is the egos of these people who are the owners of the various promotions.
Absolutely right, and that would be an amazing event, Dan. Some great insight there. Now, I want to jump in the Submission Radio time machine. I want to go back to 1994. You mentioned to us you're 37, 38 years old. You look at the sport. It's the first UFC you've ever been a part of. I just want to know what led you to wanting to kick off your career in MMA. Like you mentioned, you were a little bit older. You felt like you were a little bit old going into it. And what led you into going into the UFC? How did you get in touch with them? How did you become a part of UFC 4?
Well, basically, I did not know that this sport even existed. The first two events took place. You realized pay-per-view at that time was only really hitting major cities. So a friend of mine out of Detroit, Michigan, happened to watch like the first two events, and he copied them on an old VHS tape. And he brought it to me, and he showed it to me, and he said, "You ought to think about doing this." Now, again, here I am seeing two men in a cage. I'm seeing people getting soccer kicked in the face, and I'm watching this craziness. I'm thinking, I go, these are not skills I possess. But then when he said, well, hey, look at this skinny little guy doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Of course, he was referring to Royce Gracie. And as I'm watching, because I'd never really been exposed to Jiu-Jitsu at that point, I said, I thought, well, that kind of looks like amateur wrestling to me. And then I thought to myself, well, gosh, in order for someone to punch me or kick me, they've got to be within either arm's reach or within legs reach. And I kept thinking, I could easily either move back out of range or I can move in before they ever got any real velocity on any of these kicks. And that little theory has served me well for basically for 2 decades of staying out of range and, later on being able to actually analyze opponents when more and more things became available via the internet, when you could simply just Google up someone's name and see several of their matches on a YouTube channel or something like that, to where now I'd be that much more familiar with someone, whereas before I was walking into shows left and right blind until the night of the event, when I'm seeing my opponent for the first time, mere minutes before we're about ready to tear each other's head off.
And, in terms of obviously fighting Royce, a lot of people wanted to know, obviously in those early fights, you relied a lot on your wrestling and not quite as much on ground and pound. Do you think, sort of in hindsight, if you knew a bit more about the sort of ground and pound aspect, you would have used it more because it's, you were a bit sort of in wrestling mode, from all the years of wrestling?
Well, I'll simply say that when I was first given the nod that I was in the very first UFC, I was basically a last-minute fill-in. Someone had got hurt, dropped out for whatever reasons I don't remember, but I was a last-minute replacement. And I've always lived a rather busy lifestyle. I had a number of commitments, and I went and fulfilled my commitments. I trained 5 days, an hour and a half a day, and I walked into the world of no holds barred. Now you can realize there weren't cages abundant like they are today. There's probably not a city that you couldn't go into today, and you could probably find a cage somewhere in someone's gym or whatever that someone is training mixed martial arts. But back then there was only one cage. It was owned by the UFC. So I went to where I started my professional wrestling training. I went over to Lima, Ohio, and I did my training inside of a professional wrestling ring. So I had the instructor, and I had 2 other professional wrestling proteges, and between the 3 of them, they had 1 pair of boxing gloves, of which when one workout partner would get tired, he said be traded out the gloves. The next guy, and where I just stayed in there the entire time, and they were trying to kick, punch, grapple, submit, anything that they could do. And basically, I was just trying to stay out of harm's way, clinch, take down, use my wrestling skills, and all I did was slap on a amateur wrestling move, turn it a little bit illegal, make them scream or squawk. My training camp. So literally, when I tell people, when I walked into my very first no holds barred event, I did not train a single submission, legitimate submission. I just did some barbaric things that I just created. And number two was I never trained a single strike. So even when the UFC, they asked me, well, what is your discipline? I simply said, I'm an American wrestler. And they kind of looked at me like, well, what's that going to do for you? And I simply said, watch me. And that's all I said, because I just, I'm in some way, it might be hard to believe, in some ways I'm a man of few words, although we're on radio here now, so I have to flap my yap. But I also look at, I'm a walking historian, because a lot of people forget so easily what really took place in this sport, how it came about. So getting back to what you really asked me, in the course of that final match against Royce Gracie, it was, at the time, it was deemed the longest match ever in the UFC history. The average match lasted 2 minutes, 22 seconds at that time. A very intense, a very barbaric 2 minutes and 22 seconds. No match had gone past, I think, the 4-minute mark. And we went just shy, I think, of 16 minutes at that point, to where the pay-per-view ran out in a lot of different parts of the country. It just went off the air. I was on, I was comfortable where I was at. I took Royce down. I'm inside of his guard. Didn't bother me at all, because now as a wrestler, I've been in guards like this my entire life, but for the pinning combination. And I'm doing some of my primitive type of submissions that I worked on in my intensified 5-day, an hour-and-a-half training camp there. And, I'm realizing that I'm going to have to hit this guy. But what you got to realize, guys, at that time, I had been an amateur wrestler for 26 years. 26 years of rules and regulations worked into me. So literally, when I tell people I was more torn with my conscience than ever with an opponent, most people will probably never understand that. During the course of that match, I'm actually looking right at, I'm a big believer that the eyes are the windows to a person's soul. I'm staring right through his soul as he's looking over at his dad outside the cage wall there. And I could read exactly what's going through his mind. He's like saying, Dad, I'm hanging in here, but if you were to throw that towel in, I wouldn't hold it against you. Mm-hmm. And then I went from Royce's eyes, I looked over to Helio outside the cage wall. Helio, he's looking at me. He's got a towel in his hands. He brings the towel up. Crosses his arms, and then just shakes his head no. And I'm thinking to myself, you old bastard. You'd let me kill your kid out here for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, wouldn't you? Well, nobody knows that Dan Severn is out here tonight. So I'll just simply say that, did I tap out because someone beat me? Or did I tap out because I refused to do what I had to do to another human being? I'm the only person that can answer that question. All I'll simply say is, from UFC number 4 to UFC number 5, I took 32 days out of my life, and I trained to become a no-holds-barred fighter. And I destroyed the field.
Absolutely, Danny. Now, that must have been a really interesting period. You have your debut, you have a bunch of really great fights, and then you have that fight with Royce. Emotionally and mentally, that would have been a really interesting experience for you. I'm just wondering, following the fight, you never did get another chance to fight Royce. Is that a fight that you wish you'd get a chance to rematch in your career? And were you disappointed when you realized that it wasn't going to happen because now weight classes were brought in and you're never really going to have another chance at versing Royce and sort of really implementing a proper MMA game like you mentioned after doing proper training camps and learning the other skills needed to sort of finish Royce?
Well, yeah, it was, it really brought it to light. Once again, I mean, I probably had not really thought about it much. Just only if it comes up in an interview or something like that does it ever come back up. But having the UFC invited me out to Las Vegas for the 20-year anniversary show. Mm. And I was out there with Mark Coleman, Art Jamerson, and Royce Gracie and myself were the 4 people that they brought back. And as we're sitting there, 4 of us are on stage, and we each have a microphone. And there's over probably a couple thousand people in this little arena, and they've got 2 microphones that are set up, and people are coming up. They're lined up at each microphone just to be able to get up there and ask a question or 2, and just going to keep it going. And we did this, I think, for, I'm not sure if it was an hour or if it was a couple hours. Mm. But the questions that were being asked, it was like there was this reverence to Royce the entire time. And as I'm sitting there, I kept thinking to myself, how would that be? How would this all be so different had I done what I'm capable of doing? How would today be different? But at the same token, I can live with my conscience, and I know what I did. And some people say, "Well, that's sour grapes." No, it's not. I've actually been in the process. Most people, I mean, you guys are only aware of so many of my matches. You got to realize, when No Holds Barred broke, when did these watchdog type of websites even exist? When did SureDog exist? When did Full Contact Fighter exist? Wasn't until 2, 3, 4 years after the fact. And these companies, website companies, they only monitored one company, and that was the UFC. When No Holds Barred broke, you'd be surprised how many people were contacting me to do matches. You know, they would give me a pager. Now, see, most of your listeners, they don't even know what a pager is. The electronic device prior to the cell phone that when it goes beep, 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 there will be a little cell phone, there will be a phone number on there that you go to a pay phone or a phone, and you make a phone call to that number. So I'd be given this pager, and they say when it goes off, call the number. There'll be a ticket waiting for you. You'll fly to a designated area. You will be picked up. You'll be taken out to a designated area, and you'll be part of tonight's festivities of entertainment.
Just gonna make sure that's MMA now, there, Dan.
That was back to the No Holds Barred era. Matter of fact, one event, and I'll elaborate more on this one, was being held in Mexico. And they wanted to be, this organization wanted to be tougher than what the current UFC was. They wanted no rules whatsoever. So eye gouging and biting would be allowed, and the competition was going to be taking place in an actual cockfighting pit. They wanted to start off with roosters, progress to dogs, and in their main event, have human beings, all in the same pit, spilling blood in all 3 categories. And you could wear Levi jeans and cowboy boots on top of that. Now, I declined that opportunity because I kept thinking, if I should somehow win this match, will I make it out of this arena or out of this country before, the promoter might want to take me out back and you'll find my body in an alleyway somewhere.
Yeah. Wow.
So I did decline that one.
Probably a good thing. Now, I was going to say, Dan, you've already given so much to the sport through years of competing. As you've just told us, even more fights than we've, even been aware of. But you've also got your own school. For those who don't know, not only has Dan trained guys like Rampage, Sean Shirk, and Rashad Evans, But you've developed a 10,000 square foot training facility on your own property in Coldwater, Michigan, for anyone listening. Individuals can stay at the facility as well as train in MMA, boxing, amateur wrestling, and even pro wrestling. Now, you must love to teach. Tell us about the inspiration for the facility.
Well, again, there was something, at the time I bought it, I could have never afforded a business and a residence simultaneously. So when I was relocating to the Coldwater area for a job in the corporate world, I had 3 different realtors that were looking for property, and I passed this one particular property half a dozen different times, had a for sale sign, and I just asked one of the realtors, I go, well, what's the story about this place? And they're like, it's nothing on your wish list. And I simply said, well, humor me. Let me take a tour of the place. Well, I fell in love with it. The house is just an old 5-bedroom, just old home. I mean, it's, built probably around the early 1900s. But I fell in love with the fact that it had this old hip roof barn and then had this storage facility that was 10,000 square feet. And I kept thinking that I know what I can do with this storage facility. And so basically I had to beg my wife, and she allowed me to make the purchase. I just said that you give me this, and in about I said probably about 10 years, I can give you the home of your dreams. So I said, but you better kiss me goodbye, because more than likely I'm going to stay here because I like what I'm going to build. So, but it's a phenomenal place. Not that it's high tech, and I'm not saying that it's phenomenal because it's mine. Most people are very impressed when they walk into it because there is so much underneath one roof. I think it's probably the only training facility I have ever been to where you have professional wrestlers, amateur wrestlers, cage fighters, and then kids classes and adult classes all underneath one roof. As I said before, my first love is still amateur wrestling, so amateur wrestling is still the first thing I started teaching there. And then as I got involved in other wacky industries, professional wrestling was the second thing that was added, and then the no-holds barred stuff. So a lot of people think I just train people in no-holds barred, but no. There's actually 3 other gyms in the local area, and all of my marketing materials are inside of their gyms because they know that I'm not in competition with them. I do not want their clientele. I do not want someone that's going to drive to my place just to walk on a treadmill. I have a full weight gym into my facility, but it's just for the guys that train there that have aspirations in all of those other categories that I discussed. And yeah, there's dormitories and stuff like this. I've had some people that they'll spend a night, a weekend, a week, a month. I think I had one guy spend 4 years there.
Oh.
Wow.
They just come in for different reasons of what they're looking to learn, to do, and I had my own no holds barred promotion, because that's what it was called back then. As of I think I was doing that since 1995. I actually had my own promotion so that guys had a chance to get an outlet there as well. But like I said, I'm involved in an awful lot of different things. I always just tell people, if you want to know really more about what I'm doing, just simply go to my website at dansevern.com, because it's literally too much. I've actually been accused of having multiple twin brothers, and for the fact that I've done it for so many years, it cannot be me. It must be the son of me. Again, just because like I said, I won my first national title in 1972. I've been teaching wrestling since 71, and you guys were born when?
89.
Yeah. So again, that's just, I knew that it'd be somewhere in the late 80s, maybe early 90s. And again, I don't say that to put anyone down. I just let people know that I've been around a long time, and most people are still blown away by the way that I look and the way that I continue to move, because I don't look like a 56-year-old guy who's had that many cage matches, because most of these guys, there's certain telltale signs that you'll see about a fighter. The cauliflower ears is one of them. A nose that has been flattened and maybe shifted off to the left or to the right of someone's face, and maybe a bit of a slurred speech and a few other things. And none of those I do not have any of those attributes.
Absolutely. You found the fountain of youth, Dan, and we'll have to get the location from you later on after the interview when no one's listening. But we got some fan questions for you from some of your fans from around the world. So I'll ask you a couple now. Unique Steez would like to know, Dan, if you could fight anybody, past or present, who you haven't fought yet in your amazing career, who would be one name that stands out in your mind?
Honestly, and again, it might be hard to believe that I've never been in a fight in my entire life. I've been a competitor my entire life, though. So, even when I walked into like the world of no holds barred and mixed martial arts, I don't look at that as really a real fight because there's rules. Maybe not many in the beginning, but the sport has become a whole lot safer with the weight classes and the rounds and, the medical checks, stuff like this that they have. Realistically, if I could have a match, in my final couple of years of my career, I simply called out 3 individuals because I don't have a representative. I always represented myself. I negotiated all my own deals. And I'm a big believer that no one's going to do something better than what you're going to do yourself. So I called out 3 individuals. I called them directly. I called out Mark Coleman, Ken Shamrock, and Royce Gracie. If I could have had the last 3 matches of my career, it would have been those 3 right in that order.
Wow.
And, it basically all 3 did agree to do matches, but then, just different things just kind of came up, either timing-wise or monetarily-wise or whatever, but it just got to the point that I just realized it was never going to happen, and that's why in December of 2012, I basically put out a mass email to all of my contacts that I had for promoters and promotions and simply let them know that if they were ever thinking about utilize my skills and services, it better happen somewhere in the course of 2012 because as of January 2013, I was going to retire. So, I just basically went out my final year. I had a lot of promoters contact me, but only a few of the matches really materialized, and then I just called it quits. But, a long way of giving an answer, but it would have been just those 3 individuals for one last hurrah.
Okay, wow. Dennis, do we have any more fan questions, or are we going to do the tap out round?
We just have a couple more. We got one from Twitter. So, guys, you can actually send us questions through Twitter at SubmissionAUS. White Belt Survival at WB Survival would like to know, Dan, what techniques are too often overlooked? Like, what submissions do you see people missing in modern MMA these days?
Well, come to one of my seminars. I will show you that will boggle your mind. The problem about them is they are not fan friendly. And I guess to elaborate a little bit more on that, I've actually been involved with matches, and I have made my opponent tap out to where there'll be some dude sitting half a rows up in the bleachers, drinking his beer, who will throw his beer down and be mad and start questioning the testicular fortitude of my opponent, wondering what it was that made him tap out in the first place. And that's where, what I've done and how I've submitted people in different ways will never really be appreciated till somewhere down the road where the electronics can be produced, and then they'll finally realize if you could have put pain electrodes to my opponent, and you could have, and that fan up in the stands could have realized what just took place. That guy sipping on the beer, well, he would have spilled that beer all over himself, and he would have been simply saying, "You are the man." There's just no and ifs or but about it, because the way that you can create such pain to your opponent. And again, that's why I do a great deal of it now. I travel about and I show amateur wrestling techniques right now that how the martial arts world has influenced them to where you can actually choke an opponent out or put them in such pain that they'll want to tap out, although the tap out is not allowed in amateur wrestling. A choke out is not allowed in amateur wrestling, but I understand the rules, and none of the techniques I show are illegal by any means. Same way of going into the world of submission grappling, because again, what I show either in the amateur wrestling world, I show into the mixed martial arts world, and I also show in the world of submission grappling. I will take some of their standard techniques, and I've modified them to where I throw my little Dan Severn spin onto it. And the thing is, people are blown away. But when I'm there teaching, I'll simply say that you're more blown away for the fact that when you do them to each other, when you see me do them, you simply look at, wow, the only reason that Dan Severn makes techniques work, well, look at him. He's a big physical brute. Well, yes, I am, but I have skill that goes along with it. So that makes me twice as dangerous. So, I don't know, like I said, I have a very unique set of techniques, tactics, and I have a different mindset. I think, well, when the world was changing from no holds barred to mixed martial arts, or I should say to the unified rules, you got to realize it was changing state by state by state. I would be in a state where I'd be in the middle of a match on top of my opponent, and I actually have to look up at the referee and say, hey, ref, can I? And then, of course, I'm tipping my hat to what I'm about to do to my opponent there, but I never had any rule infractions against me as well. So, again, another long, drawn-out answer to a question.
Now, Dan, we've got one more fan question. Now, Mega Man X18, or Mega Man times 18, wants to know, what's your relationship now with Ken Shamrock? And also, how did you feel about the Brawl for All? Why did you give up your spot to the Godfather? And do you believe you could have won if you went all the way through?
Well, I mean, I'll talk about the Brawl for All first. When this event took place, it was just it was announced as a meeting where they wanted all the talent to gather around, and then they basically threw out this, the name of this event was going to be called the Brawl for All, and it was going to be using these 20-ounce boxing gloves, and the only two people that were not allowed to be in it was going to be Ken Shamrock and myself. And so I realized, I didn't pay more attention to it because I was not allowed to be in it in the first place. Well, several weeks into this Brawl for All taking place, I happened to be in the locker room. I was just laying down, using my duffel bag probably as a pillow or something like this, and I have one of the road agents that comes up and says, "Hey, Dan," they said, "we got an opportunity for you to be in the Brawl for All tonight, and what do you think?" I simply said, "Who's the opponent and how much?" They said, "Godfather," and they threw out a price tag. I go, "Okay, done." Now, the ironic part is, once the match was done, they pulled me out and said, "We're taking you back out now." So, I don't know all the behind the scenes. There's a lot more than what meets the eye on that particular situation. Now, I did not want to wear the 20-ounce gloves. I was going to simply go out there, bare knuckle, but I was not going to throw a single punch. I wanted to prove, well, a couple points. I wanted to prove to all the other professional wrestlers, but then also prove to most of the people in attendance that I will not throw a single strike, and this guy can throw all the strikes he wants, and I will twist him up into knots, and I will submit him, and never have to throw a single strike. I mean, literally, I've had, in a lot of my MMA matches, I should say that, I would throw jabs, stuff like this, but I utilize my wrestling ability all along. I never forgot where I came from. As I stated in the very beginning, I only ever planned on doing one event. I knew what my strengths were. My strengths were my grappling ability. At 37 years of age, I wasn't going to learn how to become a boxer, kickboxer, or a Muay Thai fighter proficient enough Now, granted, as I continued with my career, I kept trying to gather more techniques and tactics to use in my arsenal, but the theory was I'm only going to do just one more match. I didn't think one more was going to lead to a career of basically 20 years of doing this stuff. I did not ever think that. And even then, it was difficult to walk away when I did, because I know that I can still beat a lot of people. And that's still without doing any training. What if I actually trained? That's the scary part.
Now, Dan, what we're going to do is it's something that we do towards the end of all our interviews. It's what we call the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round. Basically, it's a bit of fun. We throw a whole bunch of questions at you. You want to answer them sort of as quick as possible, kind of like word association with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Well, I'll say that, even though that might be a little bit difficult for me. As you can tell, I have
That's all right. We always love insight. The first question, did you see Tom Lawler pay homage to you at UFC 113 weigh-ins, and did you like it?
I saw it after the fact. I thought that was funny as all get out, and to me, it's like impersonation is kind of like a way of kind of like honoring or paying homage. So I took it all in the right context. So I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Dan, you were often introduced in the UFC octagon as holding more than 100 titles in total. Now, years later, could you give us the final number of how many titles in total you've actually accumulated?
No, I'll just simply say it's 100 plus state, national, international records and or titles.
Modest man.
One day, my elaboration would be, one day when I have nothing better to do, hopefully it'll be when I'm about 104, 105, I will actually sit around, bother to tally them up, because you guys are still talking about I'm done. Sure, I'm done as a mixed martial artist. Oh, I'm not done. And again, most people only know me from what I did in my cage fighting career or my professional wrestling career. Yeah, I started amateur wrestling back in 1969. And it's, you talk about how many matches that I wrestled, how many cage fights that I have had in my career. I would average 100 matches a year as an amateur wrestler. Think about that one now. 100 matches in 1 year. Wow, and I did that multiple years. Being that I have to go off to one of the story here. Now, again, this just shows you how much different I am from anybody else. I went to a very small Class C school. You know, the school ratings were A, B, C, and D. C was pretty darn low, which means I had a total student population of 600 students or less, grades 9 through 12. So college coaches did not look at Class C. They looked at Class A and B because of the sheer numbers. If you did well in the sport at a Class A or B level, then you had to be something. Class C and D never even got considered. So at one particular tournament, I went my age group, which was junior, 18 years and below, 3 weight classes, 198, 220, and heavyweight. Again, the rules have all changed since this time period. You could do 3 weight classes. And I did 2 different age groups. I did my age group, and then I did the open age group, which was anything above 18 years of age, 3 weight classes, 198, 220, and heavyweight. So one day, I did 2 age groups, total of 6 weight classes. 17 matches later, I walked away with 6 gold medals. That will never be repeated. Again, that gives you just one aspect. And if you just knew what I did as a high school wrestler alone, was there any? There'll be no question how I would do in other endeavors that I pursued, just because of the mindset and the work ethic that goes along with it.
Yeah, certainly a very, very illustrious career. Now, the next question, Dan, is, we all know that you and Don Frye are good friends and, you helped him get into the UFC. But in all honesty, Mustache versus Mustache, who wins the Mustache battle off?
I will have to bow to Don. His mustache is it's younger, it's bolder than what mine is, and when you throw on that cowboy hat along there with it, and you hear the gravel that comes from that man's voice, obviously I have to tap out to Don Frye.
Now, Dan, out of your 101 wins, the first name that pops into your mind as the greatest competition in MMA that you had against a guy?
Well, there wouldn't be for me it wouldn't be one person, but the greatest event that I took part of was the first and the only ultimate where they brought back either champions and or runner-ups. It was the first time that you knew who your opponent was for your first match. You didn't know who would be number 2 or number 3 because it was still during the 8-man no-holds-barred era. And out of a 2-hour pay-per-view, I was inside that octagon cage just over 1 hour between my 3 opponents. That was the second training camp I ever did in my life. So that was my greatest, I think my greatest point of my career, because that was in Denver, Colorado, mile-high elevation as well. So as I tell people even to this day, I said at that point in time, my cardiovascular was off the hook. It's off the hook again, but not in a good way.
Okay, fair enough. Now, I wanted to ask you, Dan, next question, tap out round. What do you enjoy more, teaching more, MMA or pro wrestling?
Well, I mean, if you want just pure fun and get a couple of good old chuckle me yuck yucks, professional wrestling. Now, that's for the entertainment value, but in seriousness, it would be the MMA. They both. Again, that's where a lot of people will not understand because I've had a dual career. There are parallels they're on the same aspect because there's a physical preparation and there's a mental mindset. Now, granted, they are entirely different, but when you look at the category of professional wrestlers that did not live to see 40 years of age, it is humongous. How many guys never reached that age? And most of the time it's due to chemical cocktails, but a lot of it is due to the physical punishment and to the bodies and getting caught up on painkillers, muscle relaxers, sleeping pills, things of that nature. So on top of, you throw in growth hormone, steroids, something to pick them up, something to put them down, and you throw some alcohol and a few other recreational type of drugs, and you wonder why your heart gives out on you, or you go to sleep and you never wake up. Well, that's a telltale sign of that industry. Have either one of you gentlemen ever seen the movie The Wrestler?
Oh, yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
It's a classic, yeah.
Mickey Rourke played the main character.
Mm.
That was a spot-on depiction of that industry, in my opinion.
Now, Dan, do you watch MMA much? And when you do, who's the one fighter who you always have to catch when they fight? Who's someone that you're a big fan of right now in MMA?
Well, I'm afraid the one that I was watching the most basically has just retired. So now I'm looking for the new guy that I want to watch more. And it was oh my God, I just can't believe I'm drawing a blank right now. Wow. I don't watch a lot of content of mixed martial arts because there's too much of it. But I do. I will watch a select match here or there, and I've enjoyed watching John Jones over the years. But then, I can't. Okay, the Canadian fighter that just retired.
GSP?
George St. Pierre, GSP.
Yeah, okay, George St. Pierre. For life, I had his picture in my mind. I'm thinking, why can't I pull out his name? I really enjoy watching George St. Pierre because I like the way that he represented himself. I like the fact that he basically came across as educated and always came across as really, I mean, the kind of guy that he prepared properly, just showed true professionalism in what he did. Now, again, I'm answering this question two ways. Now, as a person fan, that's the way I liked it. Now, as from a business, they all cannot be George St. Pierre's because it'll be kind of boring to watch.
Yeah.
You need to have your Brock Lesnar's. You need to have your Nick Diaz's. You need people who are wearing gold chains or howling at the moon. I mean, you need the good guys and you need the bad guys.
Yeah.
It's just a way of, and that's where you're seeing more and more people that they're cutting more and more outrageous promos, stuff like this. Chelsea Saunders was probably one of the best trash talkers. Now, I've met the guy before, and actually he's a pretty darn nice guy.
Yeah.
And he made the comment when he was himself, he didn't make the money, he didn't get the matches, but when he started doing his trash talking, he got the money, and he got the matches he was looking for. So it's kind of a shame that you have to go that route, but we live, I don't know, we live in a rather shallow society, I think, anymore.
Well, speaking of going down an interesting route, Dan, here's a question, and it's from one of our fans, actually part of the tap-out round. Aina wants to know, what would you need to be offered to tempt you to shave the mustache? $1 million, 24 hours in the Playboy Mansion on a nude day. What would it take for you?
Well, no, actually, I've been approached different times. I mean, would I part with it? Sure. I mean, it's to me, I'd probably do that just for a kid's charity cause, something like that. Anything to do with military or kids, I'm really big on. If there was enough, if there's a kids charity, then when they jump on board and do something like this, I'd lose the stash in a heartbeat. Or if it dealt with the military. I'm a very patriotic type of individual. So any of those two, if the right type of thing was put forward, and I knew it was going to really benefit people, I'd lose it in a heartbeat, knowing that a few weeks later, it would be right back again.
And now, Dan, finally, out of the following people...
You may not believe what a baby face I have underneath it all, though.
Yeah.
And Dan, finally, out of these people, we want you to choose who you think should grow a mustache ASAP. Now, the four options are Dana White, Brock Lesnar, GSP, Fedor Emelianenko. Who do you choose, Dan?
Boy, I'd say out of only because it probably gets a lot more visibility, I would say that Dana White, if he was to grow a mustache, because he's on all types of Twitter and things of that nature, I think he would get the exposure.
Yeah. I think a guy like yourself who's always had a mustache, it's very normal to see, but guys like Dana White, that would be hilarious to see them in a mustache. Dan, we just want to say it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Guys, you can catch Dan, obviously, on Twitter. Follow him at DanBeast7. And, of course, check out his website. Dan, what was your website? Where can the fans go to check you out and check out that facility?
Just name DanSevern.com. Just go there, and it'll show all the different things that I do. Because we've talked about just a small sampling of the things. I've been working with law enforcement, corrections, and military over the years, as well as a border patrol. Again, teaching them physical mechanics.
And finally, Dan, you are planning a trip down to Australia. It'll be the first time that you've come down since 2004 when you were in Brisbane and fought. Tell the fans a little bit about what you know about your trip so far and where they can find out more information about it.
Well, I'm still putting this together, and it should be, I'm hoping that this takes place in the month of December. And so looks at we should be departing here sometime around December 3rd. Going to the western portion of Australia is what is being worked on right now. I'm just working with a group right now that is trying to put together a few different appearances, a few different seminars, and just looking at the timetables to see what pay-per-views will be available at that point in time as well. So a lot of that should be posted either on my website or it will be posted on Facebook. It seems like I've just taken over my own Facebook here just as of this past October of 2013. So it's been kind of a learning curve for someone that is not all that social media strong-wise, but it's been a unique experience, and that'd probably be the best way of learning more information.
And now, what was your Facebook? Where can the fans check you out on Facebook, Dan?
I knew you'd get ready to answer me that question, and I cannot answer that question for you.
Look, that's okay. We'll have the link in the bottom. You guys can check it out in the description. Again, Dan, just want to say it was an absolute pleasure and an honor having you on the show. Thank you so much for stopping by Submission Radio.
Well, thanks for having me, and maybe you want to check in again somewhere down the road to see what else the Beast is up to.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more we can cover with you. It's been a pleasure, Dan. Thank you.